Imagine a White House summit on terrorism where you can't use the words radical Islam. Well, that's what happened yesterday, and critics are saying the administration isn't facing up to the real threat in the world today.
Still, President Obama isn't changing his position, and as Charlene Aaron reports, experts say the facts show that he's wrong.
The three-day terrorism summit at the White House is over, with President Obama again standing his ground on his position that Islam is not driving terrorism.
And we are not at war with Islam. We are at war with people who have perverted Islam.
But the summit was overshadowed by criticism that the Obama administration won't call the biggest threat by its name, radical Islam. The event's title did not even include the word terrorism. Instead, it was called Countering Violent Extremism.
And the president repeatedly made clear that he believes Islam is not responsible for terrorism.
They no more represent Islam than any madman who kills innocents in the name of God represents Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism. No religion is responsible for terrorism. People are responsible for violence and terrorism.
But scholars and those who have studied ISIS, also called the Islamic State, disagree. In a story for The Atlantic called What ISIS Really Wants, author Graham Wood writes, "The reality is that the Islamic State is Islamic, very Islamic, and critics say the president and his administration need to acknowledge that radical Islam is behind terrorism and groups like ISIS."
We're kind of avoiding making decisions now, and we're saying things that really nobody who's informed about these matters can actually believe. He thinks he's doing it because he wants to avoid the impression that this is in any way a religious war. And I think it's too clever by half trying to believe that, because anybody who is following knows that it was 21 Coptic Christians who's had their heads taken off by the Islamic State.
And the administration came under even more fire after a State Department spokeswoman said earlier this week that economic problems, including a lack of jobs, was a root cause of terrorism.
We cannot kill our way out of this war. We need, in the longer term, medium and longer term, to go after the root causes that leads people to join these groups, whether it's lack of opportunity for jobs.
This week's White House summit came after the State Department recently and quietly hosted a meeting with members of the Muslim Brotherhood, much to the outrage of the governments of Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Israelis were also surprised.
We just don't understand, because we know the history of the Muslim brothers. We know exactly who they are. So how come the United States administration, yes, in that case the president himself, and the State Department received delegation of the Muslim brothers?
Despite the confusion and criticism over the president's refusal to call ISIS and other groups Islamic terrorism, the administration will support an effort to fight ISIS in Iraq by working with Iraqi troops to retake the key city of Mosul from ISIS this spring. But here at home, critics warn that it's difficult to truly defeat an enemy if you won't identify him for who he truly is. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
And we need to identify this enemy for what it truly is. And the Islamic State is very definitely Islamic. And one of the keys to why it's so popular right now in the Islamic world is the head of it, al-Baghdadi. He has not just a PhD in Islamic studies, he's well versed in the Quran, and everything they're doing is in accordance with the Quran. He claims direct lineage to the family of Muhammad. And when he stood up in June and said, "I'm declaring the caliphate, and I'm the caliph," he's saying, I have a divine right to lead the Muslim world. That's why he is attracting so many people from Europe, from Great Britain, Canada, even America, to come and rally and live under the caliph and pledge allegiance to him. It's the Islamic duty to do that, and that's the fundamental here. And if we turn a blind eye to it, it's talk about being Pollyanna. You've got to be kidding. Why will we not address it for what it is? He is claiming authority based on Quranic verses based on Islamic tradition. And his goal, immediate goal, is to consolidate all of that in Iraq and Syria. His second goal is to take Istanbul. His third goal is to take Jerusalem and then the rest of the world. That's what's going on. Until we understand what the enemy, and they clearly are an enemy, what the enemy is intending, what is the fundamental religious foundation of what they intend, we're never going to be able to defeat them. And if somehow you think this is economic, that all these people want is a job, think again. That has nothing to do with this. That has nothing to do with beheading people. You're not looking for a job. What you're doing is saying, I am following the words of Muhammad to the letter, which says, strike them on their necks. When you see Christians being crucified, what they're doing is following the Quran to the letter. That's why these things are happening. And it gets down to the very details of how they trim their beards, what clothes they wear. They're following directly the verses of the Quran. If you want to get educated as the real enemy we're facing, and it's an enemy that has been around for a while, Islam is available to you. It's a booklet, Islam, Religion of Peace or War. I want to give it to you free. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-759-0700. If you want it right now, you can just go to cbn.com. You can download it. You've got to understand why the verses of the Quran are directly inspiring ISIS today. I want you to have it, so give us a call or just log on. Get informed, and I'm just disappointed, if you will, in our administration and the State Department trying to deflect it from what it really is. I do agree this is a war that can't be won by bullets. You're not going to see military victory here. This is a war of ideas. And until we start proclaiming that their ideas about God are wrong, if you think beheading people gives you a ticket to heaven, you're wrong. If you think crucifying people gets you to heaven, you're wrong. If you think following this caliph gets you to heaven, you're wrong. And until we start addressing it that way, we're never going to see victory. Well, in other news, American pastor Saeed Abedini got a welcome visit in his prison in Iran. Ephraim Graham has that story from our CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, the wife of Pastor Saeed Abedini, says his father was able to see him in prison in Iran this week. On her Facebook page, Naghmeh Abedini wrote, "It was a very special visit which lasted several hours. Visits are normally restricted to 20 minutes. Although they were separated by a glass window, she reports they were able to share in a time of prayer and worship, and the guards didn't stop them." Naghmeh wrote, Saeed and his father were shocked at the amount of time they were allowed. The presence of the Lord was so strong, the guards did not want to intervene and end the visit. Praise the Lord. Naghmeh asked for continued prayer for Saeed's health because he's been mistreated and does not have clean water or healthy food. Pastor Abedini is a U.S. citizen serving an 8-year prison sentence in Iran for charges related to his Christian faith. A florist in Washington state who refused to provide flowers for a same-sex wedding plans to appeal a judge's ruling she broke a state anti-discrimination law. Attorneys for the 70-year-old florist, Baronelle Stutzman, say the ruling threatens financial ruin for her and her business called Arlene's Flowers. She was sued by the gay couple as well as the state, and she could be required to pay damages and legal fees. Well, imagine you want to show God's love, but you can't say a word. A church in Portland, Oregon found a way to do just that in a public high school where they aren't allowed to preach. A documentary called Undivided, now out on iTunes, Amazon, and elsewhere, highlights the powerful results. Paul Strand is on this story.
A new documentary relates the odd tale of an evangelical church in largely unchurched, liberal Portland, Oregon, uniting with a secular public high school. Undivided documents how Southlake Church laid down its right to preach so that it could serve with a whole heart the students in one of Portland's most troubled, poor, and violent areas.
Roosevelt is largely a collection of the kids who've been left behind, who've been abandoned on any number of levels.
It started with a special day of service that had such spectacular results, both Roosevelt High School and the congregation of Southlake decided to make it a more or less permanent relationship.
Oh, they cleaned the outside, of course. Made a big difference in the outside. They've come in, they painted, they cleaned all our furniture, cleaned our walls, did all our windows inside now.
A punch list of would have taken him probably 3 years was done in about 4 hours.
Expressing the good news of God in a way that really has made a difference. It's just making a difference in the culture.
Secular Portlanders were worried church members couldn't help but preach inside the school.
There's a fear there that, these church people are going to come in evangelizing and trying to get all your kids and your staff saved.
So the congregation basically promised to keep quiet when it came to witnessing with words.
The best way to convince people that you don't have an agenda is to not have an agenda.
And that's led them to see the gospel really is about so much more than what you say.
Now they need to see our hands and feet moving.
I liken it to locusts because they come and they work so hard and they just go.
Southlake's approach is more of, let me show you through the works, through my actions, what love really is.
Which we think is ultimately what changes people's lives.
One church worker became so dedicated to serving Roosevelt students, she wished out loud that she could just work inside the school full time.
The principal at that time said to Christine, "You should just office here."
Both sides agreed, and Southlake paid her to be at the school rather than at the church.
As far as I'm concerned, that business of Southlake Church having an office in a public school, I don't think has ever happened in history.
Where are the holes in support? What can we do to fill them?
She began a clothes closet.
The coat was originally $270, and this kid was trying it on, and he saw the tag, and he goes, I can't believe that some dude thinks I'm worth $270.
We're there to do the work because the kids are worth it and the need is there.
Now Southlake and its Portland partners, along with the producers of Undivided, hope this model of service can spread nationwide. The goal is huge.
There's 300,000 churches in America and 100,000 public schools. So, what if the church could really see this opportunity to demonstrate good news, meeting needs of kids?
It's beautiful. I just can't liken it to anything else.
We hear all the time about the separation of church and state, but the church can do so much for kids in public schools. As those in the documentary Undivided show, this is a case where that divide should be bridged. Paul Strand, CBN News.
Great story, Paul. The brutal cold temperatures are hitting new lows in much of the country this weekend. In parts of the mid-Atlantic and southeast, it is the coldest it's been in 20 years. And temperatures and wind chills are near or below zero in the Midwest, Northeast, and even in the South, where people aren't used to the snow and ice they've been dealing with this week. Many cities like Washington, D.C. and Baltimore set record low temperatures. In Embarrass, Minnesota, Thursday's temperature hit 41 below zero. And that's without the wind chill factor. And Gordon, dare I say it, it's not just embarrassing, that is downright brutal.
It is brutal. But it's been brutal around here, too, and we're not used to it in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Woke up to a very balmy 8 degrees this morning, and by the time I got to work, it had warmed up all the way to 11. But it's on its way up. Tomorrow, it'll be in its 40s, and if you can believe it, on Sunday, it'll be 60 degrees around here. And it's going to rain all day, and all the snow and all the ice is going to go away, and then we'll have another day of warm temperatures, and then the forecast for Tuesday, more snow. We're into some very wacky weather, Terry.
What can you say? I mean, endurance, I guess, is the word of the hour.
A persecuted Christian in Pakistan has been acquitted. The European Center for Law and Justice reports their affiliate in Pakistan won the acquittal of Imtiaz Masih. He's a Christian who was falsely accused of killing his Muslim employer's brother. When that man was killed, his brother Aslam abducted Masih and tortured him, forcing him to confess to the crime. After that, Aslam took the Masih family's land. False accusations of crimes are common in Pakistan. Pakistani Christians generally do not have the means to fight with wealthy Muslims, so they become easy targets of persecution. Operation Blessing is helping sponsor a kids club in the slums of Cambodia. Teaming up with other organizations, Operation Blessing provides tables, chairs for classes, as well as books and school supplies so these children can get an education and have hope for the future. But it doesn't stop there. They also provide sports equipment for the club's soccer program, including jerseys and appropriate shoes for all the children involved, and appropriate attire for the children to participate in Taekwondo competitions. You can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to its website, ob.org.